Hi there, this is Jamie Bograd. Thank you all for joining us. I think right now we have about 58 participants thus far that have joined us. As you know, according to our agenda, the first part of this webinar, we were going to have Mr. Tony Wynn, the Executive Director of the NAAHP, talk about NAAHP since he took over and let us know what's going on in that direction. And then he's going to do that for about 30 minutes and take any questions you have. You can submit your questions through the question box. And then we're also going to spend about 30 minutes going over all things related to COVID-19 that we're working on, and we'd love some feedback on what's happening at your campuses and what you might need of us. And so I'm going to turn it over to Tony, but before I do that, I do also need to let you know that this webinar is being recorded so that for those of you that aren't here or need to rewatch it, you can do so. So Tony, thank you again for joining us, and I'm going to turn the floor over to you.
Thanks, Jamie. Good afternoon, everybody. First, thanks very much for inviting me to talk about kind of the future of the National Association for Advisors for the Health Profession. Before I jump in, I'll give you a quick background. I served for 12 years with the Association of American Veterinary Medical Colleges as the Director of Admissions and Recruitment Affairs, as well as the Director of VEMCAS. So I've worked with this association, NAAHP, for a really long time, and I've gotten to know them very well. So having the opportunity to serve as the Executive Director has been an opportunity for me to try and make the most out of an association that impacts all of the health professions, all of their schools, and of course, all of their applicants. So I want to go through an agenda with you very quickly. I have a few slides, and we'll talk about the inside of the National Association, the organizational structure, so that you have an idea of how we do what we do and who is doing it. I'll then talk about a vision that I have. I've been in this role for almost 7 months now, and to say the least, it is not the 7 months that I had expected to serve. It's been different, to say the least, but I'll share with you my vision for the association. I'll talk a little bit about advising. I know you're all familiar with advisors, or you are advisors, but I'll share some insight that I have on advising. We'll talk about the shifting landscapes, both in advising, but also in the admissions landscapes and how they interact with each other. I'm going to share with you some of the hot topics that are going on with the advising community right now, most of which you're already familiar with. COVID, of course, is one of them. And then I will take as many questions as I can with the time remaining. So with that, inside the National Association of Advisors for the Health Profession, as I said, I came into this role 7 months ago. October 1st was my first day. The Executive Committee and the Board of Directors, of course, is our governing body. I report directly to them. The staff of the National Association has 5 individuals: Melinda, Pam, Ivana, and Tisha. And we have 1 vacant position for a web administrator, project manager, technologist. And one of the first things I decided to do was structure the organization so that we had sort of categories of each of these people. So now the association has communications, finance, operations, membership, and technology. The model that was used before was sort of everybody does a little bit of everything, and while I'm a fan of cross training, if someone called in, I wanted someone who was specific and assigned to that category to answer a question. So everybody now has accountability in their respective areas. Besides the 5 staff, we obviously work with committees. We have an enormous number of committees, from post-bac committee to community colleges. Basically every sector of advising has a separate committee. Now recently, well, not recently, I worked with the Advisory Council, of course, as Executive Director, and have served on the Advisory Council for a number of years through AABMC. The Advisory Council is the health professions. They represent each of the health professions and help us with information that we can give to our members, and information that comes from our members we provide to the Advisory Council to help either the CAS or the health professions or knowledge that we need or information. Then recently I started developing task forces. These are short-term committees that are created for a specific purpose. They have a beginning and an end. They have a directive, and so we've got a number of those going on right now, including technology and a couple of others. So with this organization, the first phase was to figure out how we do what we do, why we do what we do, and align the skills, as I mentioned, of all of the folks that are involved with the department that I felt that they should be in, so that we can have accountability. The internal operations, the structure, the process, and how we do what we do is critical. So I spent a lot of time understanding that, but I also challenged the association to tell me why we do what we do. And what we found in asking that question is there's a lot of stuff that we do that we don't know why we did it. So a lot of that stuff we don't do anymore. And then an important factor for me was to make sure that the staff has professional development. We want to make sure that they're constantly honing their skills, their knowledge. I'm a lifelong learner. I want them to be a lifelong learner. So that was phase one. Make sure we're all working together as a team with our own specialties. So we've accomplished phase one. We're now in phase two, and that's the services. Now that we know what we do and why we do it, well, what do we do for our members? So we spent some time identifying and analyzing the obstacles and the pain points. Prior to October, when I started, I spent a month calling, I think it was about 150 people or so, from board members to members. I talked to a couple of the association members. I wanted to know what the perception was out there in the field of this association. I was pleasantly surprised, and I was also a little bit concerned by some of the obstacles that I've heard. So what it led me to was to understand what are the actual needs of the membership. Are we providing what they need? And if we're not, we need to know what we don't know. So we need to do the research, we need to do the development, we need to provide services that they need. We can't do that without identifying them first. So once we're done with that, which we're still in the process of, we'll move to phase three, and that's delivery. We need to review our membership structure to begin with. We're not servicing all the different types of advisors that are out there. So benefits, initiatives, goods and services, new publications, new tools, new online development of curriculum for professional development. All of those things are part of the services we want to provide. Like any association, we need to pay close attention to membership development and growth. We need to increase our membership, and we need to make sure that our leaders, from the associations to our advisor leaders for the regions, all have the opportunity to develop as leaders. So there's a lot of work also being done in partnership development. The private sector, the business sector, the nonprofit sector, the institutions, the associations, all of them are partners of ours that have different interactions with what we do and with advising. This also includes partners in high school and possibly in the STEM area, even grammar school possibilities. So outreach initiatives are aplenty, and those are how we're going to determine how we're going to provide the services that we want to give to our members. So a few months of all of that craziness and understanding where we are, what we're doing, why we're doing it, it became very clear to me that this association was run very much as a reactive front office, if you will. My plan here is to recreate the association so that it is a driver, a proactive driver model of way of doing business. So the vision. What does the future of NAAHP look like? Well, there are two pieces that I have that are visions for this association. The first one is to position the NAAHP as the voice of advising for all the health professions. I'll be completely honest with you, many of our advisors think there's only one or two health professions that exist, and all the work they do is for those one or two health professions. We need some equitability. We need some equity, in our advisors. So if we do have someone sitting in front of an advisor that is interested in a health profession that is not as popular or not as large, they get equal treatment from that advisor. Of course, in our tagline of the association, we call ourselves the voice of health professions advising. So that makes sense. We need to position ourselves to do just that. The second vision that I have for our association is to significantly increase the services, resources, and tools for all of the different communities that NAAHP serves. So this isn't just advisor members. Our memberships are patrons, that's schools. Our membership is associations, the health professional associations, as well as community college, post-bac, undergraduate, even some high school counselors. So if we offer services that they all need and want, we'll find ourselves in a better position. So the big question here is, how do you accomplish those two things? Well, in order to accomplish vision number one, we need to understand what being the voice means. And I see it as two things. First, having a voice for the health professions means we represent the profession, either through the national office, through our board, through our executive committee. And the other definition would be that we are the hub of service and knowledge for undergraduate or for health professions, for the pre-health professions. The second way to accomplish it is to continue to reach out to partners, collaborate and coordinate. All sorts of partners, whether they be business, keep going back to undergrad, health professions, businesses, associations, etc. We need to develop an evidence-based and sustainable infrastructure as an association. We shouldn't be providing information that's based on opinion or hearsay. We are an association of academics. So research, research, research. And based on that, we know the story that we need to put out into the public. As an association, one thing that's really lacking is that we don't promote. We don't develop any programs for marketing or advertising. We don't provide advertising very much for our members, for our health professions, etc., our schools. So the other question that has come up a bit has been, does the NAAHP have a place at the table for the student population? And it's a question I don't have an answer to, except to say that we're reached out to by students all the time. Many students don't have advisors or don't know where to find one. So we may be expanding into the student population sometime in the future. So that puts us at the table. But let's talk about how to accomplish vision number two. All of the health professions should be represented with the association by creating a knowledge base for advisors to tap into. We need to be able to coordinate that. We need to review our membership structure and our benefits to make sure that we're offering truly value for the money of membership and the development of advisors. We want to develop online resources. We're talking about an MSAR-like directory for all of our partners. Schools, health professions, one place to go, searchable directory based on criteria, get all the information you need all in one place. One of the things that I'm working on right now is to develop an advisor tool. The advisors used to use a program called AdviseStream. Many of them are not using that system anymore, but there is a great need for the advising community to have such a tool. So as such, my working title would be NAAHP Advise, N-A-A-H-P Advise. We're in the beginning plannings of what are the features and needs of a program like that, and then we'll see how to make sure that that happens. We're about to roll out conference management support. We actually do 4 conferences in the odd number of years, and we do 1 major national conference in the even years. So we've got conferences going on all the time, and they consume the majority of our time. So a software will allow us not to have to do that. We can focus on other things. And the other thing that we're doing is developing, right now we're developing year-round programming for membership, for our leaders, whether they are a series of webinars or continuing education credits that they can get for taking a certain number of podcasts / webinars. All of that is to be determined, but we're starting to work on that as well. So the value for the money of membership is plans to be increased. So to accomplish the vision, both of those visions, we need to coordinate. We need to work with activities on all of our strategic planning initiatives. The board of directors creates the strategic plan, and we need to make sure that any of the work that we do to accomplish the vision meets the vision of that strategic plan. We need to identify and coordinate with field leaders and content experts within the membership. No sense on reinventing the wheel when you've got folks who have been doing this for 30, 40 years, and they have all the knowledge. So we need to tap into that. That's done through the task force, that's done through the association partnerships, and it's done through the NAAHP committees. External partners, all vendors that are out there, all non-health profession associations, business partners, possibilities for grants for initiatives, all of these need to be coordinated as well in order to accomplish our visions. And then the existing relationships that we already have need to be redeveloped and strengthened. A good example of this would be at ACOM, as a matter of fact, back in January, the board of directors met with all of the advisory council members. And instead of talking about updates and what's new and all this stuff, we spent the entire day working on our relationship. What does the advisory council want from us? What do we want from the advisory council? And what does the partnership look like in the future? So it's a great example of how this should work moving forward. So prioritizing projects and initiatives, as I mentioned, the NAP Advise project is probably the high priority because this is a tool that advisors need, and they're not shy about saying that they need it. So with all of this, at the end of the day, we'll have a fine-oiled machine called the national office to run everything. And that's the ultimate goal here, to provide the best services we can to our members. So many of you probably already know about advising, but I'm going to talk through some changes that are going on in advising, but also share with you some of my thoughts about the state of advising. So as you know, in the pipeline, advisors are at different points throughout the pipeline. Some of them are at the very beginning, grammar school and otherwise. Some are in more high school. We've got community colleges, undergraduate, postgrad, and then we have independent advisors that work with anybody that wants to work with them. All of those touch points are given access to different information. So that national hub of information is really critical no matter which touch point area these people are coming from. The key advisor responsibilities, you probably already know: serve as guides to prepare for the health profession's career, resources for students to learn more about careers, connectors between the health professions and the students. Those are the key responsibilities of an advisor. So one of the things that I'm very guilty of in my tenure at AAVMC is when I thought about the student pipeline, I always thought about it in terms of 4 different areas: recruitment, admissions, matriculation, then practice. Now this is pretty general. So between matriculation and practice, there may be internships, there may be all these little extras. But in thinking of those 4 things, it occurred to me recently that I was missing a really critical part, and that is recruitment, advising, admissions, application, matriculation, practice. What I've been guilty of is I would often forget that advising is part of that process. Now, the health professional associations like ACOM or AAVMC or AAMC really focus on three areas. They focus on the recruitment, they focus on admissions, and they focus on applications. So that advising part is a critical piece that needs to be at the table at some point. Obviously, all the CAS services work with admissions and recruitment as well. So the shifting landscape of advising, there are a number of obstacles, and the number one obstacles that advisors have is change. Change is not something that they enjoy, not something they embrace very well. And when you've got someone like me who's rattling cages and pushing buttons and poking bears, it can be uncomfortable for them. But the reality is their entire life is changing. Advising, no matter what sector you're in, advising is no longer considered just an academic transaction. It's also not considered only GPAs and only test scores anymore. As I'll talk about in a moment, there's other factors that are coming into advising now. The age-old faculty advisor is now kind of in competition with a primary role advisor. The difference between there is traditionally faculty served as advisors for certain programs. But now institutions are starting to put together advising centers or advising offices that are staffed by non-faculty. So there's a battle going on here. The advising centers are starting to take over. These are business people in a lot of cases. Some of them have educational background. There's a lot of reforms going on institutions. Many of you may be familiar with these regarding guided pathways. How early do you start someone in the pathway to a health profession? Meeting the needs of the professions. The professions are constantly changing. Admissions are constantly changing. How do advisors make sure that they're advising correctly as all these changes are occurring? Then advising outcome assessments and program review doesn't really exist right now. There is no body that's going to go into an advising office and provide industry standards or any sort of review of whether or not a program is actually successful. So institutional guided pathway reforms mean advising is now seen much more as a critical mechanism for enhancing large-scale transformation of the student experience. It's expanded now into career advising and academic advising and financial conversations and student debt issues, and all of these things are now falling on the advisor's plate. And without the proper knowledge, we would hate to think that they would lead a student astray. And you are all very familiar with the fact that institutions are changing the admissions landscape. Holistic admissions, competency-based admissions, all sorts of implicit bias training going on campuses, and all these things have made advising a complicated area to keep up on. So some of the hot topics right now: the National 2020 Conference in New Orleans, which is scheduled for June of this year. Highly questionable. Right now, we're still moving ahead. We should know probably by the end of this week whether or not we are going to transform that conference into something that's more virtual. We're talking about contingencies right now, and we are hoping to have a decision certainly within the next week, if not before. Another really hot topic right now is pass-fail prerequisites and online acceptance. With a ton of courses now being put online and a lot of the admissions processes not looking favorably on online courses, how is that going to equate when the application starts rolling out? And pass-fail prerequisites, same sort of thing. A lot of the admissions processes and a lot of grad schools don't prefer pass-fail. So that's a question that's going to have to be addressed. COVID-19, no question about it, has taken over the last few months. Our website, nwahp.org, has tons of resources and tools and a lot of discussions that are going on about it. The majority of discussions on the advising side are, how do you transition to an online platform? Or how do I teach a lab online? We provided information from all of the health professions for students as well, so they can see what the latest is on the COVID situation on the health profession side. So one question that's come up over the last 7 months that I want to share with you, people often ask me, what's the hardest part of my job so far in the 7 months, and other than this COVID fun that we're having, is that I've learned that there are 7 words, when put together, physically make me twitch. And those 7 words are, this is how we've always done it. The NAAHP has always done things the same way for many, many years. And my response to that, when people say it now, is not anymore. This is how we've always done it, not anymore. So there's a snapshot in a short amount of time of a bunch of stuff. I hope it was helpful to you. If any of you have questions or comments, you have my email and phone number there on the screen, or you're welcome to ask questions through, I think, the question panel. But that's what I've got for you. Thanks for your time. I appreciate it, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Tony, we really appreciate you spending some time with us. Again, if you have questions for Tony, please use the chat function of the Zoom. A couple of thank yous. So we appreciate. We'll keep moving ahead, and Tony, we would love for you to stay on if you'd like, and I think a lot of this information you can convey to advisors if they haven't heard already.
Thank you.